I have quoted this anecdote by very famous quote by Ali brothers, one of the Ali brothers, who was asked about his opinion about Gandhi. And he says very clearly that Islam teaches me that even if Gandhi is the best Hindu, he will still be in my priority lower than the worst Muslim. It's a stated goal of Quran and Bible that the idol worshippers, they are worshippers of devils, and their gods should be destroyed. It means that the vigrahas of these gods should be destroyed, their abodes, the temples should be destroyed. So anyone who says that he wants to kill me, would you not call him a Shatru? So these ideologies are of course your enemies, which have their stated goal as the destruction of Hindu society. I do not subscribe to a place where, the idea of India is higher than the idea of Sanatana Dharma. The idea of Sanatana Dharma forever is the highest in any case, in any scenario. That is a fundamental axiom. In no case can it be subsidiary to any other identity, be it caste, be it region, be it country even. Everyone should be welcome after Ghar Wapsi. In 500, 600 years of Islamic rule, a lot of places were regained. For example, my own birth town, Gwalior, at least 5 or 6 times there was an absolute genocide of the city that not even a single Hindu was left alive. And then Hindus from all over, they came and started settling. People who were converted, they went back to Sanatan. Because if you don't do that, it's just a matter of when and not if that Hindu society is dead. And after that, neither the philosophy, nor the text, nor anything that you hold dear will survive if the Hindu society is gone.
Namaste, Pankaj ji, and welcome back to Upclose with Upward. And I am so glad to be holding this copy of your
Thank you.
first and hopefully first in many more to come book, Swayambodha and Shatrubodha. And before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to do a free advertisement for you. Please buy this book, read it. If you don't want to read it, watch this interview to get the contents of the book in a different format. But please buy the book, because this is the least that you can do to support such scholarship. तो सर हम शुरू करते हैं. मेरे को आप ये बताइए कि इस बुक में 1 second. So I'll start with a very personal question. I think this is the first time that you have acknowledged the influence of your guru.
Yeah, publicly.
So what is that story? कुछ है पीछे?
So his influence always has been there. In my private talks and speeches, I always, in every second sentence, his reference comes. Because like I say here, everything that is good and wise in me comes from him. So I finally wanted to, it had been a long dream of mine. When I'll publish my first book, I will credit him. I didn't ask him for this, because had I, he would have abused me and said कि मेरा नाम खराब करेगा तू posterity के लिए यहाँ पर डाल के पता नहीं क्या लिख दिया और मेरा नाम उसमें लगा दिया. So he would have gone like this, but finally I had to take his name, because to not do so would be dishonest, first of all. And second, I do not have adhikar of certain things that I've said in the book, in the sense that they come directly from his experience. Especially the Swayambodh section. Okay. I have an experience due to his guidance, his initiation, and his insights that have guided me in the last 22 years. That's why it's very critical to have acknowledged him here, very clearly.
So the book starts with, the introduction starts with this section called Kali Charan's question, which is very interesting. And you've written it in your typical literary form. Mentioned this anecdote of the 23-year-old driver who was taking you around. Which place was this?
Vidisha. Vidisha district.
Okay. तो यहाँ पे आप Hindu unity and disunity, you talk about the difference in the qualitative nature of the divisions in Abrahamic or Islamic and Christian societies versus
and Dharmic societies.
Dharmic societies. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So I have said this in many other videos also, that it's not that the Christian society and the Islamic society are not divided. If you see, they have many sects. They keep fighting with each other. Dr. Els and Arun Shourie have also gone on record saying that most of the Muslims are killed by Muslims themselves. In fact, an overwhelming percentage, more than 90% of them. So it's not like they don't fight with each other. But the thing is, when it comes to an enemy, to a non-Muslim, they all unite in their opinion that they are below the worst Muslim. And I have quoted this anecdote by, very famous quote by Ali brothers, one of the Ali brothers, who was asked about his opinion about Gandhi. And he says very clearly that Islam teaches me that even if Gandhi is the best Hindu, he will still be, in my priority, lower than the worst Muslim. And Quran has ayats to that effect. So this makes it very clear, no matter how much infighting goes between them, between their society, they are able to unite when a non-Muslim comes in front of them. So this feature of theirs, but how are they able to do it? I answer in the book, because it's an elaborate history. Why are Hindus confused about Islam or Christianity? How do we create our identity? How do we think about our own identities? Many layers of identity. We decided by language, kshetra, region, food, and common culture. But you see, in Islam and Christianity, two people from two very different parts of the globe are able to unite on the basis of an abstract idea. So this rewiring, which happens in Judaism first, when Moses is taking his flock in Egypt, from Egypt to Israel, that incident, when the 10 commandments are given, when all of these concrete markers of identity, language, region, place, these are obliterated, and instead they are given an abstract idea symbolized by a book. That is why they are called the people of the book. They hold their adherence and identity to a book, to an abstract idea, and not to actually concrete markers. That is what they mean by people of the book. Otherwise, everyone has written books. In fact, they just worship one book. We are, like Kapil Kapoorji says brilliantly, we are people of the library, not of the book. And all ancient cultures were very literate cultures, actually. So what is the meaning of this? They are not just hypocritical or ignorant. See, no matter how violent they are, they have reasons about certain claims of what they claim. When they say people of the book, they say their identity, their very identity is derived from one book. And that is what you also mean by a normative society, that you create some set of rules and then you remake or create society based on those rules. This is called as a normative society. Hindus are unaware of that normative society. We have practice, we have society, which agrees upon certain practices which are mutually agreed upon. And then actually certain rules, which you can say law, rules, or you can refer to them by any other name, then these books or these shastras or these rules come. But here it's the opposite. So that's also the major difference which I see in monotheistic religions and dharmic traditions, that they are people of they are dogmatic people, we are experiential people. We base even our shastras are based on experiences. There it's a crime to ask what is the basis of this dogma. You cannot question the dogma. Here, of course, there is pramana, but that pramana is always verifiable if you were to acquire those means under the guidance of a guru. In a practice, in meditation, you are able to verify all of that. In fact, it has been verified by countless jnanis over all these thousands of years. None of them have found the truth that is written in the Vedas to be wrong. That is the claim of the Vedas to be Shabda
But then
Pramana.
wouldn't the same principle apply to, let's say, the Christian saints who also claim to have had visions of Jesus, or like Francois de Sales and
all of them claimed.
Or Francis Assisi.
Claiming a vision is a very different thing.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying that is your claim that there are no genuine saints or elevated people in their, whether we should call it a tradition or not, is something we have
in their society, let's say.
In their society, yeah. So let's say someone like Saint Francis of Assisi.
For that, there has to be a real practice of meditation, and which is absent there.
Okay.
I've also discussed in the book that at certain points in the history of Christianity, they have discussed whether to allow independent verification of the truths written in the Bible or not. Is church necessary or not? And at many periods of in their history, some of their sects have claimed that no institutional authority like the church is not necessary. Like the Gnostics claim that in Egypt, in northern Africa. Every such sect has been, through genocide, been eliminated because they are never able to remove the authority of the church, because that displaces church from the central power. And second, they have no means of verification. if there are 10 commandments, what is the proof of those 10 commandments? What is the practice by which you can test it? For example, if you read a book on quantum mechanics, and if you're reading it, you are taking it at, you are trusting the author. So this is basically Shabda Pramana. You are not going in a lab, let's say CERN, and you're not actually doing the experiment, but you're taking the word of the author. So this is Shabda Pramana. But if you were to acquire those skills, and if you were to go to that lab, if you were to do that experiment, you will find the truths that are claimed in the book to be true in lab. You are able to verify that. So in theory and practice also, it is possible to verify that. But in Islam and Christianity, there is no practice. You just have to believe. And there are various hadiths and also canons in the history of Christianity. For example, there is a saying in Islam, in Arabic, bidda haram, which means innovation haram. So you don't have to think, you don't have to question. To question is to question the authority of God and especially the authority of the Prophet. So that is one of the most significant differentiators between their society and our tradition.
Right. So I will just, I just want to sort of
go back
into this conversation and play the proverbial devil's advocate.
Yeah, please do.
And we are also close to Bakra Eid.
Yeah.
So I feel obligated to take that position. It is one thing to say that there is no systematic mechanism to allow for this experimentation and
no tradition
experience to flourish. But let's say, let's take Sufis, for example, right? And incidentally, we are releasing a video tomorrow on
Sufis.
So all of this is converging in some way. So let's take the case of Sufis. They might have advocated for or taken positions politically that are genocidal even. But from time to time, there have been some elevated individuals who have arisen. And these individuals, they have also had those experiences, which may not exactly be the highest of the highest, like we have in our tradition, but they've gone
quite far.
Some distance.
Quite far, yeah.
Right. So, how do you think about that then? Then they're also following a certain code, which is there in their holy book.
Yeah.
And still they're able to go that distance. So, how does that work out?
So for this, let us first of all analyze the theory of, not very deep, but analyze the theory of Advait, Atma and Brahma that is there in our tradition, because here we have hashed it out in most detail of any civilization on earth. So if we are talking about Brahma, if we are talking about one consciousness which has differentiated one becoming many and created the entire cosmos, let alone about entire earth or entire human societies, then that also tells us that Muslims and Christians are also part of the same consciousness.
Yes.
Of course, fallen to a level where they refuse to recognize it in human history, but they are part of the same consciousness. So how is it impossible? It is not impossible. I would say it is impossible that none of them will ever feel the touch of the divine. That touch will be accidental, but that will of course be there in every century. In fact, I would say in every decade you will find people inside Islamic society, inside Christian society, who will have inadvertent experience of the divine, which are very, very high. And there have been documented cases of that. Let alone Sufi, which is in itself is a great, not great tradition, I would say, but a great continuity in many ways. But there have been many incidents in the West. For example, there is Gurdjieff, that German mystic,
right,
and who would initiate his students into some sort of physical labor, which will throw them into trances, which will elevate them into all these spheres. So such kind of spirituality and the divine striking certain individual kept happening all over earth. So that is not a patent of a Dharmic society. A Dharmic society simply makes institutionalizes the pursuit of moksha. So if you were born in a Hindu tradition, in a Hindu society, the institutions would actually help you in pursuit of moksha. So this is another great differentiator. If you were born in a Islamic or a Christian society, actually their convention, I call it convention and not tradition, would try to stop you from becoming. But the accidents always happen. There have been many such accidents. If you read the works of Sri Ramana Maharshi or Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, there have been very many whites who were born Christians, who had these mystical experiences, and then they came here many followers of Papaji, many followers of Neem Karoli Baba, and a lot of them have come also from Central Asia, from even Middle East. In the Islamic countries, there is a very famous case of some Central Asian Muslim is just stumbling upon one work of Sri Ramana Maharshi and then coming all over from there to Tiruvannamalai listening to him because something struck him. He always had those experiences, but he had no theory, no contemplation, no Shabda Pramana, let's say, to confirm what's going inside him. So when for the first time he sees his book, he travels all over the way. So this used to happen. But the Islamic society and the Christian society would punish it because according to their theory, Yahweh and Allah, let alone being them, you cannot even listen to them or hear to them or talk to them or see them. You always have to go through the proxy. These are political ideologies masquerading as dharma. They call it religion. They are just political because if you don't want to lose control of a central institution, then that's just politics. So if you cannot remove church from the centerpiece, if you cannot remove ummah from the centerpiece, then you're doing this. Now, Islamic history had many interesting encounters like this. Sufis, we know, there were many original Sufis in Iran who were real mystics. I'd say some of them could even have been Gyanis, Jivan Mukta. And they had found ways to talk about in an Islamic society so that the boors would not understand what they are talking about. For example, there is this very famous Sufi poet Attar, and he has written a book, The Confluence of Birds. So in that book, actually, there is a confluence of birds, conclave of birds. Birds from all over the world come and they tell stories, and at the end of every story, you find that all of them are talking about one thing, one concept only.
Okay.
So this is in a way Advait presented to them in such a way in which the Islamic sultans would say this is just childish story and let go of them. So there were mystics like this in Iran, and then you have another way which they stumbled upon to talk about it in sexual terms. Imagine a society which doesn't punish sexual liaisons as much as it punishes spiritual pursuits. So a lot of this poetry in India, Sufi poetry in India is very sexual in orientation. And actually they are talking about Guru and Shishya. They are not talking about bride and groom. They are talking about Guru and Shishya, but to hide it from the authorities, they talk it in a way. Now this will be very controversial, but one of the interpretation of Chhap Tilak Sabchini, there are many lines in which it is very clear that man was of course a soldier of Islam. But there was a convention in their society also in which some truths were transferred from one person to another, even if that certain individual was not worthy of carrying it. For example, there is a line, Mohe Sohagan Kardini, Naina Milaike. Now, how does this happen? Naina Milake, that's almost a process of giving Diksha by a guru looking at a shishya. So something like this is being explained. And there are many such songs of Sufis in which this happens. But what happens is that in a society in which this is punished, first of all real mystics will be killed. And in Iran, there were a lot of these Sufis were killed. And then the second wave, they copied the language of Vedanta, but carried the convictions of Islam, monotheism, very deep in their heart, copying the language completely to fool Hindus. Because Hindus always had great respect for philosophy, for darshan, and for, mendicants, roaming mendicants. So if you were to sit under a tree and, start speaking some flowery language, now neo-Advaitins and a lot of neo-Tantra experts also use that language. So in those era, they also practiced that. And that would attract a lot of Hindu society, and that allowed them to function as the spies of Islamic sultans. So on real ground for Hindus, it didn't matter at all. All of them worked against Hindu society. And for us, I speak from a Hindu point of view for the defense of Hindu society. And from the point of view of defense of Hindu society, their Sufis, accidental Sufis, didn't do us any good. In fact, it did us a lot of harm.
You mentioned that they are people of the book and we are people of the library. And that in your book also, you've talked about dogma in the Abrahamic scheme versus experience. But not everyone is actually, pursuing moksha. Not everyone is doing sadhana and, experimenting there. And when I say not everyone, by that everyone,
More
I
than
mean,
99%
yeah,
of the society.
it's the overwhelming majority. And that overwhelming majority has to operate by a certain code. So, when we talk about the pramanas and we say that Shastra must be followed and things like that. So, how do you then reconcile with that? I mean, when you say that, okay, it is verifiable, but I don't think anyone can make the claim that this is, let's say, scientific that way, right?
Yeah. I see no contradiction here.
Okay.
Because more than the overwhelming majority that you say, even in science, an overwhelming majority is not able to do the experiments that are done by the scientists. In fact, as science reaches far rarer realms like quantum physics is now, it's actually only on Earth around 1,000 or 1,200 people actually do understand what's going on.
Correct.
In the books that are being written on those subjects. But still, it is also Shabda Pramana in the sense that, let's say, instead of calling Vedas as scientific, let's say them as wearing Dharmic or Shastriya in this way, because if you were to acquire those skills and do that, you will not find a truth which is contradictory to the claims that are made in that book. So Vedas have never been controverted by all the people who have gone actually and asked those questions, contemplation also, and then done that, gone through that experience. Now, I think the second part of your question, which remained unsaid, is that what about the rest of 99%? Is there no? Do they just follow? No. So we have this elaborate set of rituals which are given to us by the Rishis and Jnanis who have gone through that level. In fact, in my chapter on ascent and descent of consciousness, once a Jnani, a Jivan Mukt, reaches the highest stage, and when he looks at it from that vantage point on entire samsara and all its activities, then he creates rituals and mechanisms which are most conducive for that particular institution, for that particular individual in that particular situation. And most of our rituals which were created in Sanatana Dharma were according to that. So people doing very simple maneuvers like in morning waking up and offering jal to Surya or to some other deity, having some other daily rituals, and then going through a set of rituals daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and in their lives, going through going through these customs would also cleanse your chitta over a period of time. And as moksha is a process of many, many lives, not just one life. So it would successively move them towards a place where through many births, they do actually come at a point where they are directly able to meditate under the guidance of a guru and get moksha. So it's not a one life process, it's a many life process. But Sanatana Dharma, my guru used to say once again, and I don't know if I've used this term exactly, but I've used that essence, that Sanatana Dharma is a hold all. There was, when he said that when he was a child, there was this electric appliance which was called a hold on, and all sorts of sockets were there. So we were always a society in which we cared about every single person.
Correct.
So first of all, there is this greatest of philosophy which is given in the Upanishads, which is given in many other texts also, which only a very strict minority can follow. But then there are rituals based on that most of society can follow. But the same rituals, for example, that the truth that is contained in the Vedas and Upanishads is also dispersed through the agency of Itihasas and Puranas. So when Vedavyasa comes, when the knowledge of Vedas is not directly conducive to most of the population, this is where he makes the first intervention, historical intervention, and he makes converts the unified knowledge, which before him was just unified knowledge. Then he divides it into not just 4 sections of the Vedas, but also Itihasas and Puranas. Because certain people who are not able to directly participate in yajna and Vedic sacrifices and rituals, they can hear the story of Mahabharata and Ramayana and get the same kind of knowledge. And that's actually the architecture of all our texts also. There is a great story in which there will be instruction on niti, on all aspects of life. And there will be a Gyan Khand in that, a Gita, which will speak on the highest sort of knowledge, which is actually the character of most of our texts. And beyond that, there were Puranas who, through millions of stories, kept telling the same story again and again and again, kept illustrating on many aspects of life. If that were not enough, we also created the tradition of jatras in our country and the tradition of roaming mendicants who would just not earn,
The
but go
Kathavachakas.
through entire Kathavachaks and go through all of Bharatvarsh, and in return of the food that they got from the Grahas ashram, they would tell stories, the greatest stories in Upanishads and all of these texts and scriptures. So that's how very democratically, without centralized authority forcing its view on all of population, Sanatana Dharma was able to take that central darshan philosophy to every last person, every single person in Bharatvarsh. That's an achievement I've written about it, which is singular in the history of humankind.
Yeah.
Either you do it barbarically through centralized force and violence, or you don't do it. But a society which is able to do it without violence and with everyone's participation is absolutely brilliant. Because even if you today go to rural places and find a quote unquote illiterate woman, she will speak in a language which is very conducive to the language that is in Upanishads. For example, there is a sentence which people repeat a lot. I recently went to Kumaon. In Brahat Anveshi, we led a team to Kumaon, to the temples of Kumaon, eastern Uttarakhand. And I was going with my driver, and I said, Ki Golu, there is a Golu Devta there who is considered a form of Bhairav and worshipped in every single home, in every single village. Yeah. So I said, who is he? Is he a form of Shiva? He said, yes, Bhairav. But after that, he explained about, yes, he is a form of not exactly Shiva, but Bhairav, more specifically. But then he said, Sab ekka hi hai. And this sentence you will hear all throughout India. So this sense of Advait and Vedanta, which is very, very abstract also in one way, but contemplate a civilization which was able to take this to even quote-unquote illiterate people. That was the zenith of our civilization. That is one of the most important aspects of our civilization.
Since you've mentioned Advait so many times, I vaguely remember reading somewhere someone criticizing you on Twitter, saying that
you keep claiming that Advait is the central, but it is not. So these differences also exist, and they all have our space, but through very wide agreement. See, there is not a single fact written in any shastra which every Hindu will agree upon. That's also our beauty in one way. Now, Shashi Tharoor might have said that, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Always, in certain cases, it might be right also. So that is the Hindu way. People dispute on a lot of things. But the central truths of Advait, actually a lot of sects and a lot of society agrees upon. It's the umbrella darshan under which a lot of other darshanas gather. In my view, I'm not an expert on that. In my view, some very, you can say, orthodox Dvaitvadis, except them, almost all other darshanas have some nuances which are different from Advait, but they are not actually, enemies of it. But the Madhvas, for example, would very vehemently deny the truths of Advait. But apart from that, interestingly, Madhva Sampradaya is the only Sampradaya in Hindu universe which has the idea of eternal hell, which is unheard of in any other sect in India. Only Madhva Sampradaya has. So it might be a response to Islamic, attack and trying to, unite their flock against them. But in my view, and this also might be controversial, monotheism is also a universal vikar, which keeps arising at many different places all over the world. Now, our civilization was able to strike it down every single time. We are just not enough vigilant that we couldn't do it 7 seas away. It actually became successful in Roman Empire, in Western Asia and Roman Empire, and then it became so powerful over 2000 years that when it knocked at our gates, it was already too strong. It had ended every other player on the planet, traditional player on the planet. That's why Sita Ramji says that we should not have fought the barbarians on our lands. We should have gone on their lands and fought them there.
Okay, so that answers the Advait question. I was just discussing in the one of the previous episodes of Upclose, we had Giriratna Mishra ji, who had come, and we were talking about the Kashmir Shaikh Darshan, and he mentioned something called this distinction of Agyan. One is Bodh Agyan and one is Paurush Agyan. So this, I just recall this, where Bodh Agyan is basically the Agyan of Shastras, where you're not familiar with the Shastra, and that Agyan has a certain effect on you, on your experience, on your consciousness. And then the Paurusha Gyan is the lack of experience, where you haven't done anything, but you've only... So you become a literalist in one case, and in the other you become some sort of a hippie. I don't know. But interestingly, what in the course of that conversation, this Bodha Gyan, which is the ignorance of the Shastra, it leads to a certain kind of ego manifestation or pride and things like that. And then you get carried away, and then there is a downfall, which is very common. So he was of the opinion that Shastra is there to keep your head on your shoulders.
Yeah, of course.
Unfortunately, what happens, and I think you've mentioned here also, the literalists and the people, the scholars, the dry academicians who go through tomes and tomes of our Shastric literature and then become Mahapandits, but they can't even add 2 and 2 together in real life, like that. But at the same time, the converse of that also happens. So the danger of putting experience without Shastra.
That is also a danger. In fact, let me quote once again my guru on this.
Okay.
He used to say that, of course, without experience, nothing is possible. This is all about experience. But at the highest level, if there is not a final act of contemplation, jnana is not possible. And that contemplation is an action of a mind where mind makes itself disappear. And after that, the real jnana, the highest jnana appears. For that, you need that willing act of contemplation, which Shastras are very capable of aiding. So actually, their Shastras become very, very useful. So to confirm that where you have arrived upon, because there will be certain false alarms in your journey towards moksha. At many places, you will think that you have arrived. In fact, a lot of people think that they have arrived very soon. A lot of places.
Too many people.
So Shastras keep warning you, as a guru also does, that you don't have to get stuck in these stages, no matter how many powers you are getting in the process of meditation or dhyan and yoga that you're doing. You have to keep proceeding towards higher and higher stages. So there you get confirmation. So that's, of course, that is very necessary, and doing one without the other. See, we are talking about the benefit of a Sanatana tradition. Why consciousness is everywhere, like we said. It is present in all the different cosmoses, not just one, all the different universes. So if it were only about experience and nothing about a tradition which actually carries that experience and aids that experience, then what's the need of saving Sanatana Dharma? The entire argument of saving Sanatana Dharma is that this is a tradition which actually facilitates through various institutions.
I get it. But
these means.
But what I'm saying is, again, my concern is the 99% overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an anecdote to share my perspective clearly. I was teaching my son science. One of those rare moments when I was teaching. So that is his first year of proper science, and the first chapter is the scientific method and what science means. And in that, they're talking about how scientific progress is made. They're introducing concepts like hypothesis, theory, falsifiability, all those things that connote what the scientific method is. Or wo explain karte karte, there is a small factoid, an illustrative example, which says that, the sun, you just talk about the sun, and it says that in primitive people, they believed that the sun was a god. And then, there were some more clever people. They thought, how can it be a god? And then they speculated, then they hypothesized, they said it must be a burning ball of coal. And over the centuries, now we have come to this understanding of the hydrogen.
That, it's a physical thing.
Yeah, the hydrogen, helium and all that. And so this is how scientific progress is made. So, when I was teaching him, obviously it occurred to me कि ये क्या बोल रहा है यहाँ पे. And I knew that there is a question coming. And he said, my son said, oh, ये झूठ बोल रहे हैं ना.
Yeah.
So now I said, how do you know that they are lying? No, you only told me. So I said, I could be wrong. Then he's like, no, then, my teacher, my grandparents also are saying the same thing, etc., etc. And I told him everyone could be wrong, This is how scientific progress is made, right? Everyone could be wrong, yet one person can stand for the truth.
Yeah.
So those myths, the scientific world में जो myths हैं, वो सब बताया जाता है. But without actually introducing the idea of pramana and without telling him ki authority kya hai.
Yeah.
That it is, the sun is the god not because I say that, but because the Shastra says that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very crucial missing link in the current way in which people are taught up.
So, see, the way science is being taught, we have to also understand the journey of science in Western cultural sphere. What is science? It is very clearly defined. And that sort of science also had a place in ancient India. It was always there. We had no divorce with science. In West, what happened? Religion claimed the place of dharma, of their traditions, and then made science an enemy, because anything new, anything innovative, anything which introduced experimentation was an anathema to them. So their experience of what they consider as religion was so bad that they have evolved in a way in which they are very, very shy of anything which goes even very close to religion. That's also one of the most important reasons we cannot say that ours is a religion. Dharma is not religion. In that sense is very, very important. So they have come to a point where their cultural sphere thinks of their, and that's also a very Christian idea, that whatever happened in the past was, it was an ignorant past. Man was a very ignorant beast. He was afraid of nature. He started worshipping it. But when he actually discovered science and technology, he controlled the forces of nature. This is a very Christian idea, that Bible gives all of this nature for your consumption. Science, even after the Western world found it, it is still derived by the Judeo-Christian ideas. And it is that cultural Chittabhumi which actually produces texts which are as stupid as you just quoted, and which are, we just take lock, stock and barrel all of their science. That's why I say, because we work with IKS and we work with a lot of people in IIT and their how to implement, I say that we have to encounter the journey, divergent journeys that their science has taken over past 500, 600 years, if not 1,500 years. And our tradition was, until we were hit upon by, these invaders of both kinds. And we have to reconcile all of that. The distance that it has traveled away from everything traditional, because it equated tradition with religion, which in their experience was very bad. So we have to account for those differences. For example, and I have read books actually by beautiful scientists, for example, Lovelock and Gaia hypothesis, and a lot of these scientists who talk about in near mystical terms.
True.
If you read Wilson, if you read all of these people, they talk about as if all of these, even stones are alive. When Marcus Jones talks about, when Neil Shubin has written two extremely wonderful works, My Inner Fish, I call it the Advaita of evolution, where he traces anatomy of different species down to the level of fish, and says that despite all the overt differences, our structure is actually the same. Then he goes to the level of amoeba, a single-celled organisms, and says that even there it is the same structure which is percolating. So it's a vision of Advaita, one becoming many, if you trace it from amoeba to human being. Then he writes another book, My Inner Universe, where he traces the same structure to atom and says that it's all one. So this is Advaita of cosmology. So if you were to read those books, it's actually also the poorest people becoming professors and teachers in our country, and taking the driest parts of science. Science is not as dry. We have a very wrong opinion of that. And you are much aware of that. When you read some of their best texts, now they are actually becoming more and more mystical in their writings also. So we have to bridge that distance. Hindus have this responsibility to inform science and to bridge the gap which it made in its experience of Christianity, that not every dharma is religion, not every dharma is Christianity. We are not averse of science, we incorporate it, but we also have other means of exploration, especially when it comes to our inner experiences.
Sorry, it's not in the book. It's a note that you've written or posted on Facebook, I think.
It's an article also that I've written.
Right. And it's an open letter to the moderate Muslim. And maybe you can...
Yeah, so I start that article by saying that, my dear moderate Muslim, I'm sure that this letter will never reach you for the simple reason that you don't exist.
What I want to understand.
Why have I written?
What I want to understand is, नहीं जो आपने पहले कहा ना कि जैसे ये सूफी थे, ये exceptions आते हैं. So then, अगर ये हम देखें Muslim society में, there are certain people who follow these Sufis. There will be people who listen to the poetry of Baba Bulle Shah or Rumi or whoever, or Amir Khusro. And you will find these traces of mysticism, even good quantity mysticism there, and these ideas that you said that there are about love and devotion and all that. So wouldn't they be moderate Muslims?
No, moderate Muslim is a very different category. It is being claimed as the overwhelming percentage of Muslim society, like 99% Muslims who are peaceful, who are loving, who accept everyone, who share food with others. So that kind of moderate Muslims, Sufis are just
share food
with others. Yeah.
सभी करते हो.
But it is supposed to be a very good, very unique feature of Islamic moderate Muslim society. So that's a very different category, imaginary category, of course. But Sufis are just accidental individuals, which are parts per million, even lesser than that.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, but there are people who look up to them, right?
Who look up to them, but their influence on Islamic society is zero, negligible. And sometimes they even aid Islamic,
of course,
bigger Islamic narratives.
Like the Sufis themselves.
So it doesn't help us at the end of the day, once again.
Okay, got it. I really wanted to ask you about that. So in the section B, Shatrubodha, you start with chapter 6 as the enemies of Sanatana Dharma, and you say who is a Shatru and who are the enemies of, or who are the Shatrus of Hindu. So can you elaborate on that?
Any ideology which calls its stated goal as the destruction of Hindu society and its consumption and conversion into its own branch of religious ideology is an enemy. Mm-hmm. It might be religious, it might also be a non-religious version of the same ideology. So for example, it's a stated goal of Quran and Bible that the idol worshippers, they are worshippers of devils and their gods should be destroyed. It means that the vigrahas of these gods should be destroyed, their abodes, the temples should be destroyed. They shall either be killed or be converted to their branch of religious ideology, Christianity or Islam. So anyone who says that he wants to kill me, would you not call him a Shatru? So these ideologies are of course your enemies, which have their stated goal as the destruction of Hindu society. And let me tell you that some of them will even claim to preserve your Shastras, your texts, in translated versions. Like the West does. Islam doesn't claim to do so. But the West today is very busy in translating our text and preserving it in Harvard and Cambridge. But when there is no living society to interpret those texts correctly, basically they are not saving anything. It's their way of museumization. For example, they are fond of they find the last couple of a bird of species, they will, Western preserver will promptly shoot them down. Stuff them with and then scientifically study them. So that kind of preservation I'm not interested in. Until Hindu society lives, Sanatana Dharma lives. So Hindu society is extremely critical in survival of Sanatana Dharma. That's why they are inseparable in that way. Sitaram Goyal starts all of his works by that warning that do not be happy that the West has now started reading your books. They read Greek books also. Greek philosophy is being taught in all of their university. But where is Greek dharma? Where is Greek tradition? It's all destroyed. Where is Greek society which worships those gods? And do these gods die? For example, a lot of people ask. No, the gods are they are never dead, as Sri Ram Sarupji says. They are real beings. And they exist in realms, higher realms, in which they don't even care about in certain ways, like what happens in lower realms. We simply have forgotten our paths of access to these deities. For example, I recently went to 1 year ago, I guess, or 6 months ago, to Kullu, one valley in GB. And the local person took me to a very natural place of temple of Ma Hidimba. Now that was a natural stream, and in one corner, they had placed the vigraha of Ma Hidimba. And there is a great legend that Ma Hidimba came here, and there are certain stories which played out. Now, I went there in autumn, in the month of autumn. And so, the track, it was covered with all those leaves. Now, when the track once again starts, you rediscover that path by removing the leaves and the detritus that actually gathers there. So, when a tradition goes dead, it simply means those people have lost paths of access to their deities. The deities have not gone anywhere. They're not dead. Right. They are still there. You've just lost your paths of access to them. So this is what we mean by traditions which are dead, traditions which are alive. And you do not want to do that because it takes thousands of years for something like Sanatana Dharma to come up and create such a great gamut of literature, all these Shastras, and the society which can uphold and carry those Shastras till perpetuity. So after all the horrible attacks on our society, there is not a single day, my guru used to tell me, there is not a single second which we have spent in our history ever since this great tradition came to be, in which there was no living carrier of great Sanatana Dharma, the great eternal tradition, which was right there. Countless of Gyanis who never speak. He says that on an average, 1,000 and 10,000 of Gyanis, Jivan Muktas, only one decides to speak and the world gets to know about them. They might just be roaming about and you wouldn't even know that they are Gyanis or Jivan Muktas. Right. So that's why it's a living tradition, because these saints, these Rishis, these Jivan Muktas who can carry the tradition are still alive. They are carrying forward the tradition by initiating others and keeping the continuity.
True. So if we go beyond the book also, what you've written in the book is perhaps an attempt to make Hindus aware of the in-group, out-group, and things like that. But in practical terms, we inhabit a country which has everyone, 75% Hindus or something like that. Of that 75%, it is debatable how many are Hindus in practice. But you have the biggest minority in Muslims, which is about 15 to 20%, whatever that may be. So armed with this knowledge, where do you want Hindus to proceed? How do we proceed with this awareness, the Shatrubodha, as you say?
So once you are aware of the battlefield, this battlefield of civilizations, individually also it's very good for you. For example, after the Nupur Sharma case, every Hindu who got killed was the one who trusted some Muslims as their dear childhood friends. Everyone who died was not someone who was critical of Islam. They were all those who thought that, there are some fanatics, but, this is my friend, this is my childhood friend, he won't do it to me. So all of them were mistaken about the real identity of Islam. So actually, very functionally, if you have great Shatrubodh about your own family and about your own self, you will be very safe, armed with this knowledge. About transacting with them, so they also live in our society, they do all the business with us, and yet keep harming Hindu society, Hindu tradition all the time. I say, if you become aware of that, you can do the same to them. You can weaponize the same things. They have weaponized market, they have weaponized hereditary jobs. If once you become aware, you can also do that. So once you are aware of the battlefield, you can actually turn everything around to your benefit. For example, the same institution, Gujarat ASI is generally not known to be a body which is conducive to, Hindu concerns and all. But in Gujarat, what has happened because of the 30 years old culture and, Hindutva taking more roots and one entire generation of Hindutva coming out. What has happened in MP, Chhattisgarh and Gujarat is that now 20-somethings they were born in the Hindutva era. And now they have come up with that consciousness. So in Rudra Mahalaya case, what happened is that I went there recently around 4-5 months ago, even less than that. And so I went to this place, Rudra Mahalaya in Patan was one of the greatest centers, Hindu centers, were brutally destroyed by Islamic invaders. What happened recently, because they had completely depopulated the area many times of Hindus. And so if you see all these ancient sites around them, there will be a ring of Muslims and very, Orthodox Muslims living all around that. This place also has a lot of their homes. So what they started doing a few years ago, they just entered the temple, created another Waqf, dome, painted it green and started offering namaz. And so the temple and the place is ours, which they always do. So what happened is then ASI, before this Waqf bill also came, it was the only organization which had the legal authority to throw such a group. So they entered, they actually dismantled the entire structure, what was created by them, threw them away, and then completely preserved it for the Hindu side also. So in this way, institutions can be turned around once you become aware of the battlefield. I'm not saying every institution can be, but a lot of these things, market can very easily be turned to our benefit. But once you are aware of them.
But do you have any sympathy for the view of the Indian state, for example, as it has been over the last 75-80 years, about how to deal with this question of coexistence, Hindu-Muslim coexistence, and the approach that they have taken is a more, reconciliatory approach, arguably.
Economic.
It may be, in hindsight, we may dismiss all that, and for good reason. But the attempt has been to sort of, build a new synthetic identity of Indianism or whatever, and say that, okay, बाकी you are free to practice, you're free to practice और ये करो. The approach that you are suggesting here is one where there is high awareness, and at an individual level I can understand, but when it scales up to the societal level, don't you think that then these communities are in a zero-sum game?
See, the Indian state's approach still is far from Shatrubodha. A lot of people, a lot of individuals in the current dispensation for a very long time have been very acutely aware of the situation. But I also agree that publicly the time has not come. People like Prime Minister or Chief Minister can openly say things which should be said by intellectuals. So I say the time has arrived for Hindu intellectuals to start saying those things. There will come, Overton window shift will come, where the entire society is so conducive to whatever ideas thrown by the politicians in this regard, in benefit of Hindu society and Hindutva, that they will be able to say that right now time has not come. But I don't think my pyramid of, if you have seen, my pyramid of Swayambodh actually contradicts the constitutional nation state that we keep, touting all around. In that pyramid, Dharma is supreme, Sanatana Dharma is supreme, not even Desh is higher than that. So I do not subscribe to a place where, the idea of India is higher than the idea of Sanatana Dharma. The idea of Sanatana Dharma forever is the highest in any case, in any scenario. That is a fundamental axiom, universal axiom. In no case can it be subsidiary to any other identity, be it caste, be it region, be it country even. So even those who say that country has to be the highest entity, even that is wrong, because let me give you a hypothetical example. It will never happen, but suppose if in 100 years later, this country becomes 51% Islamic and the very nature becomes Islamic. Would I agree to that sort of Indian nation? Absolutely not. I will go against it. So my loyalty will be to Sanatana Dharma, because any country is great only when it aspires to follow the high ideals of Sanatana Dharma. This happened in Malaysia, for example. They threw out Singapore, because with Singapore, they were less than 50% Islamic majority. They threw out, and then they had maintained a slight majority, like 50-51%. And now we are at a stage, not we, Malaysia is at a stage where they are more than 70% Islamic. So they Islamized the nation, very brutally Islamized the nation. Now, very soon, they will end whatever little minorities are left there. So that's why even the idea of Desh, and even in Shastras and tradition, Desh is an idea which is subservient to actually Dharma, because Desh is not this nation-state category. Even Maharashtra would be called a Desh, Karnataka would be called a Desh, Madhya Pradesh or any such unit. What we call as states today would be called as, not exactly rightly mapped completely, but they would be called as Desh. And there are rules which are applicable on Desh, there are rules which are applicable globally at the level of Sanatana Dharma. So nothing is higher than Sanatana Dharma. A lot of people and community and groups will have a problem with my pyramid, because a lot of people say, how could you say this is lower than that and that is lower than that? But that is actually the truth. Even Desh or country has to be lower than, in priority, than Sanatana Dharma.
Right. Just a while back, before the podcast began, you were talking about why you've combined these two, and despite suggestions from well-wishers that you may want to write two separate books.
Yeah.
One on Swayambodh and
one on Shatrubodha.
But just this conversation is enough to give an idea why these two always appear as
are inseparable.
Yeah. And to take a concrete example again, recently there was this visit of Mehbooba Mufti to the shrine of Mai Kuladevi, Kshir Bhavani.
Yeah.
And somewhere on social media only, I think Upward made a post quoting from the Shastras why the entry of Mulechas is not welcome.
Yeah.
But it was the most of the opposition did not come from the Muslims, but Hindus only.
Yeah.
Who said that no, we should open our arms and everyone should be welcome.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with this?
Everyone should be welcome after Ghar Wapsi. Of course, I am also of the idea that everyone should be welcome, but let them do Shuddhi, let them do Ghar Wapsi, let them, quit beef eating, and then let come over to Hindu Sanatana Dharma. There will be rituals, and after that, they can of course come and enter the temples, but not before that. Before that, if there is some a space where they want to approach and want to know Sanatana Dharma, there are various other ways to do it. There will be museums, there will be academies, there will be media houses, there will be intellectuals with whom they can talk. There will be books, you can always consult them. But the temple has a certain charya, and we don't exclude. We simply say that if you do something which is directly opposite to the charya that we recommend, coming to a temple, because a devotee is also recommended a charya, not just a archaka. So then that is the reason of excluding Muslims and Christians from Hindu temples. That should always be there.
Right. So, how do you actually, in today's context, how do you deal with that? Because anyone can enter a temple, right?
Most of the famous temples do prohibit. But if you were to hide, of course, like Pahalgam, they don't check your pants before you enter a temple. So if you were to, pose like a Hindu and enter, that's okay. And there is not much you can do about it, because, for example, like in Sri Rangam, where there are lakhs of devotees daily, you cannot, check whether someone is a Hindu or a Muslim, or even the ID they cannot check. But otherwise, most of functioning Hindu temples have a ban on letting Muslims and Christians enter, and that should remain so. More and more temples should actually follow that, and we should facilitate. You want to come in, we want to facilitate that. Do Ghar Wapsi, come in and then do enter the temples.
So, with regard to that spiraling down of the relations between the two communities, what you're suggesting is that...
I will quote Sitaramji in this. Actually, it will not spiral down into a vicious circle of violence. Inevitably, there is always violence. So you can choose a situation where only Hindus die, or you can choose a situation where, after some, show of strength at a social level, there is a peace.
So in chapter 11, you've mentioned the title of the chapter is Weaponization of Life. थोड़ा सा elaborate कर दीजिए.
Yeah, actually, this is a very big topic. But I will give 2-3 examples and finish with that. For example, they are experts, Christianity especially, even more than Islam, is expert of weaponizing every aspect of life. Now, Hindus are not even, they don't even understand what does this word mean. In Hindi, it is called as Sashastrikaran, which is a made-up word.
It's a positive word.
Positive Sashastrikaran, but in this sense, a made-up word, in the sense, recreation of, retranslation of weaponization into this. So, Sashastrikaran in one way is to empower someone with arms, but in the way weaponization is used is to use an aspect of life which is very normal and common and social for the rest of people, which is used as a weapon by a certain ideology. For example, we do charity. Our Shastras have commanded that since the Vedas, that charity is one of the highest goals of Hindus, individually, institutionally, and we have always done that. But we are also inspired and told that if your right hand, does charity, even your left hand should not know.
Right.
Because you cannot talk about charity. Because the entire point is that your ego is lessened, ego is destroyed. But if you talk about it, your ego is, heightened, and that's not the purpose of it. Now, what did Christianity do? It weaponized charity. So now when they convert, they say, you don't do charity, we teach, we make schools, we make hospitals, and hence we convert. We also do all of that. But we do not weaponize it for political goals. So this is what weaponization is. For example, in another life, like you have a son, and anyone else, any other Hindu who has a son, what will they think when they grow up? That he should, find a very good partner and settle down, so that with whom he can enjoy his life. Now, what does a member of a monotheistic society think? That let us think of how to increase numbers of Islam and Christianity by marrying someone, then forcing them to become Muslim, and then their kids would also become Muslims. So even if that were to create a lifelong strife and an unhappy married life, but even at that cost, they have weaponized love and marriage. And so they have weaponized education, they have weaponized state, they have weaponized economy, they have weaponized love and marriage. They have weaponized sorrow also. If someone were going through divorce, they will suddenly appear and say, you should just pray in church once and Jesus will help you. And last but not the least, to use that cliche, they have weaponized even death, not just in jihad. Their dead bodies do jihad. And I will illustrate how. When a Hindu dies, for 1 million years, a certain 3 crore big Hindu city can, keep cremating Hindus in a certain ground, and for millions of years in the same ground they can keep cremating. Sab jal gaya, raak ho gayi, raak ko bhi humne baha diya. But when a Muslim dies or when a Christian dies, even worse, what happens? They occupy real estate in your country, put up a coffin, and they put up a plaque. Forever it is claimed, after the person is dead, the dead body is doing jihad. It is doing land jihad, it is occupying land. We really have to think on those things when you develop Shatrubodh. And I say one solution is that you don't disturb Hindu rituals. You just say the state has to take a decision. Whenever a Hindu dies, a place as big, which is as big as a Yajna is reserved as an ecological forest for forever, where nothing else but a Hindu temple can be built later on. And when millions of Hindus die in a certain patch, it is a reserved forest. At the center, there is a temple. Yeah. So this
you will
way,
bring Wilson's idea of half Earth to life.
Half Earth to life by doing this, and both cultural and natural problems, and they are one and the same, will be solved by this. So for that, you have to understand how they weaponize every aspect of life.
Right. You have also mentioned in the very next chapter, it is the Hindu view of secular modernity, and when you were talking about the weaponization of life, there were so many secular aspects that you mentioned, right, and which are now subverted or weaponized, as you say, by these ideologies, masquerading as religions. Yeah. But what about secular modernity? What is the Hindu view?
It's a very vast subject. I've tried to actually sum up in one part the thesis of Asan Balgangadhar also. That secularism as an ideology is a very Christian creation, because it came in a Christian background where lots of Christian sects were fighting each other. And once again, experience comes into play, because they had no way of proving who is right and who is wrong. When Protestant claimed that Catholic priests were actually abusing the Bible, they were right. But then they said that how to prove it? They also had no way to prove it. So they started claiming, another sect started claiming, we will control that what is the correct interpretation of Bible. And very soon there were thousands of sects. All of them thought only they were right. All of others were wrong. They were abusing Christianity and the Bible. They all started killing each other. Now when this became too big a problem, they had to come up on a solution. Otherwise, the society was not functional. In that sense, they brought in all of these fundamental principles of democracy and liberal secularism. For example, the principle of toleration. Now, the very word is so negative that you don't like someone. They are very unpleasant, and still you have to tolerate, because you have to maintain a ceasefire, permanent ceasefire in society. So that comes from that Christian background. Now, the two central tenets of secularism, that you have to separate the private from the public, and you have to separate the state from religion. These are central concepts of Christianity. Like there is a very famous saying in Christianity, unto Caesar what is his, unto Christ what is his. The historical background is when they started converting in Rome, but they did not have power in the first 30 years, they had to explain that situation. That if you are people of the God, and if he promised you so much, rivers of honey and all, then what's happening? So they said, this world is not ours. This is a lower world. That higher world is ours. And so unto Caesar what is his, unto Christ what is his. These are two very separate realms. But then they stumbled upon power when Constantine converted. So they had to reconcile. Then they said the spiritual power is higher and the secular power is lower. So there also, to keep religion private and Christianity private, was when Roman Empire was pagan. And they were not allowed to practice Christianity, as openly, because they were very abusive of other traditions and gods and goddesses. So that principle of that principle comes from there, of keeping public and private sphere separate. And then keeping state and religion separate comes from Protestant Revolution, where every state, adopted one sect, and through using that sect, they would commit a genocide of all other sects. So they had to decouple a state from any religious sect. So these two tenets are very, very Christian. They have no place in a society which has no experience of something like prophetic monotheism, religion, or Christianity. And like Sita Ramji says, if you do implement on our society, by backhand, it starts creating those elements in our society which are Christian-like, which we can see in the past 200 years that we have in both ways. In orthodox extreme also, and in liberal extreme also, democratic secular idea has created Christian mirrors in Hindu society. That's why it is very dangerous.
Right. This brings me to the last part of the book, where you have mentioned the Swayambodh Shatrubodh scale, and you have very playfully ranked ranked people and ideologies
Certain
and,
famous,
within the Hindu fold
Yeah.
on these two parameters.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm sure you had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
And this is also something which would create the most controversy.
Yeah, I know.
So I want to ask this question, anchor this on the idea of Ghar Wapsi, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really the crux of
Yeah.
all these disagreements and things, because people misrepresent. I've seen that people misrepresent the other side. And I'm talking about purely within the Hindu fold. I'm talking about the debate that is happening in the Swayambodh sphere. So, Ghar Wapsi, my critique or my problem with the whole idea is that not that it is problematic in principle, but in practice. Why? Because all these problems that we mention in the Swayambodh the part of the book, these come in the modern life because of a destruction of Hindu institutions.
Traditional ways of...
Right, and the traditional ways of life and traditional ways of thinking also. Cognition itself has changed.
Yeah.
And modernity is particularly guilty of that in how how modern ideas have seeped in and infected our minds like a virus.
Yeah.
So in a society like that, there is always a danger of becoming your enemy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And all those things that we accuse them of, or not just accuse, but demonstrate, like you have done in this book, that demonstrate that this is how they operate, there is a great danger that we become that.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it in the sense of how Shashi Tharoor says it.
Yeah.
Now, when you do Ghar Wapsi at scale, hypothetically speaking, one, it is practically very hard, but let's say there is a great movement towards it and you are able to do it. When things happen at scale and when things happen ikka dukka, there is a huge difference.
Yeah.
Right? So at scale, when your society, your institutions are weak, and you bring in a lot of people from outside. Again, you mentioned what happened with the Roman Empire and how the pagans... I remember reading in Catherine Nixie's book that when the Christians actually came and they started destroying everything that was beautiful in the Roman Empire, the pagans actually thought that these are riffraff, and rightly so. That these are people who don't even understand the subtlety of our practices. They don't, and we are all philosophers, we are...
It will never touch us.
It will never touch us. And they looked at them like, these...
barbarians.
Ekdam sadak chhap, right? So when you bring in or you bring back the people who went away from the Hindu fold in conditions of 21st century India, where Hindus themselves are struggling with being Hindu and practicing, and all kinds of misconceptions are there. So then, how does
We
that
manage.
work out? Yeah.
So that's where I say that Ghar Wapsi is not just a job of either just the state or some socio-political organizations which are very eager to do this. They can only go until a certain point. The moment Hindu Sampradayas take it as their mandate that they will approach one single community which is coming back, people from one single community, and we'll teach them the ways of our Sampradaya. That suppose a Vaishnava Sampradaya, suppose even a Madhva Sampradaya or a Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, they start approaching that we will target this is how the Christian churches also do, that we will target people of this community when they come in and we will teach them this, how do you worship this God, how do you maintain Charya. The moment they start doing, all of these problems will be solved. And this is what happened in case learning from the history of our enemies. Christianity and Islam lost steam many times in course of their history. They then regained that when they got fresh converts from another great community and tribe. So if you were to and take the same text, take the same set of customs and rituals which we follow, which certain Hindus follow, and then if we teach them, the newcomers who are coming back to our society, that the moment our sampradayas get into that game, it will be a game changer in the way no force on earth will be able to withhold that. This needs the 3 or 4 powers need to come in. A state needs to protect people who are doing this. Its job only, Actually, traditionally, its job only is to protect people who are doing this.
Maintain law and order.
Maintain law and order. Then Vaishyas need to, cough up all the money which is used in this, because you also have to help them financially. What the church does, you also have to do. And then your dharma gurus, your sampradayas, different sects, and there are sects which are very eager to do that also, which are doing it also. When they get into this game, and we have thousands of sects, we have so much of diversity. So we are not even short of that. When many thousands of sects get into that game, because Christianity dividing itself into thousands of sects actually helped it. Because every single sect wants to convert you into their branch of Christianity. So if a Vaishnava and a Shaiv vying each other in competition to teach them the ways of Vaishnavism, the ways of Shaivism, or Shaiv way of living, or Vaishnava way of living, if we are wary of using the suffix ism, then that will change the entire scenario. And I'm very confident that that will happen. In fact, in history, that has happened. There was a time when almost entire Bengal was gone, converted to Islam. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes, who does not just hold the tide, but also gains a lot of people back into their own society. So he did it. Then Ramanujacharya, it is said that at one point of time, the coastal Andhra had developed a great Muslim minority. But then the great Ramanujacharya comes and he, regains them into the fold of Sanatana Dharma. So our saints have done that over a period of time. In 500, 600 years of Islamic rule, a lot of places were regained. For example, my own birth town, Gwalior, at least 5 or 6 times there was an absolute genocide of the city that not even a single Hindu was left alive. And then Hindus from all over, they came and started settling. People who were converted, they went back to Sanatan, because in those times it was much easier than it is now, when the census and all they have come in. So that is not just possible, that has happened in our history, that will happen again. Because if you don't do that, it's just a matter of when and not if that Hindu society is dead. And after that, neither the philosophy, nor the text, nor anything that you hold dear will survive if the Hindu society is gone.
True, but I think that a precursor to that would be that the state actually starts supporting Hindu institutions.
Yes, true.
Because recently there was this controversy over the Banke Bihari Mandir. So in a situation like this where these sampradayas themselves are so disempowered, and they are at loggerheads with the state. The state is doing its own thing. The communities are doing their own thing. The gurus, they are somehow, they're also barely surviving in some sense. So I think you have to first put your house in order, isn't it?
I think you cannot wait to do one, to accomplish the other. Both have to, proceed at the same pace.
But I do think that
the universals of Sanatana Dharma, which we have forgotten, they need to be taught back to every single Hindu. Yeah. And that also we need to press the pedal. That what does it mean to be Hindu? That's why in the first part, I say there is that karma, punarjan, moksha, that is a set of axioms. And rita, rina, satya, dharma, this is a set of axioms that we base our cosmology upon. But then in practice, the avdharna of pancharin, which decides our kartavya bodh, which decides our dharma in this life, if we do not follow that, or if we do not even teach people, for example, if we talk about rina in this way to Hindus, most of Hindus now, they wouldn't even recognize. There was a time when all of this was, common knowledge. So we have certainly lost that because of deracination of many generations.
No, it's
of
not.
Hindus.
I think it's not just deracination on account of conversion or the more violent ways, but also just the economic system that we...
Economics and the state which is colluding, which has been colluding with that system. So in education, it was directly the authority of the state which stopped us from knowing what Hindu Dharma is. They prevented us, and still it's a very weak, whimpering attempt to get it back. Correct. There are attempts, but very whimpering attempt to get it back. After Pahalgam, for the first time, certain agencies of the state, you can see that very clearly taking up Hindu stances for the first time in history. Now, this is we are doing in 2025. We should have done that, long back. And it's far from enough. We have to do a lot more. But I'm positive that things are happening. Once again, when the Overton window shifts in society, politicians cannot help but to follow. Because, nobody loves Sharia. Nobody loves Islamic society as such. They force every party or every, ruling dispensation to do their bidding because they are relentless in their demands. The moment you develop that sort of locus inside Hindu society, which is not majority of Hindus, let me say, just 4 to 5% of Hindus if they develop this core, which never compromises on things, which always pushes for forward, then you will have a situation where politicians will start following, a state will start following. Even this, they are responding to the change that has happened in society in the last 30 years. What is happening now? Because I saw after Pahalgam, for the first time on Twitter, people openly saying terrorism has a religion, directly naming it. Boys and girls as young as 18, 20 years old, and that getting as much traction as millions and millions of likes and views, which means that a large part of Hindu society now, large ka meaning, at least 2%, 1 or 2% are not aware of it. I would say take this to 5-6%, you have got that core which will push every Hindu concern.
Absolutely. I think that the goal is to, one, build that intransigent minority.
Yes.
And to mobilize the elite,
Yeah.
the Hindu elite.
Yeah.
The rest just happens on its own. And I keep saying this again and again, wherever I get a chance, that you don't have to go out and convince the last person in the line. You don't have to worry about the masses. The masses are always flippant. They will say one thing today, they will say another thing tomorrow. I mean, people get all worked up when they see what happened after Pahalgam, when Hindus started saying, oh, no, इन्होंने तो हमारे साथ, अरे ये तो बड़े अच्छी चाय पिला रहे हैं, अरे. But there's nothing to get worked about. That's the nature of the masses. We must look at people who are in command, and they need to be mobilized, and then you will have another, percentage of the intransigent minority, and the rest is...
Well, happen on its own. See, even Pahalgam, it's not like it happened for the first time. It has been happening to us all these years. It is for the first time a sufficient Hindu minority is aware enough that it will make so much noise everywhere, on the streets and online and offline, that you cannot ignore that minority. This has happened a lot of times. I mean, actually, days apart, there was a great massacre of Nigerian Christians, but nobody gave, them about Nigerian Christians because they do not have that lobby enough where their voices get heard. But now Hindus have that lobby enough where they can do all of this.
So Pankaj, tell me about why you chose this design, this decapitated murti of a deity. Tell us more about the cover.
So I chose this because I mulled over and I thought a lot of time how to represent this. This is actually a vigraha of Shasti Hasta Narsimha, which means 60-handed Narsimha in sculpture. So my question is, this is very striking. Imagine a civilization which is capable of creating this 60-handed Narsimha with a different ayudh in every single hand. Imagine a civilization which is capable of creating it, and imagine a civilization which will destroy it like this. That's your Swayambodha and Shatrubodha.
So I think with that, I have obviously much more to ask you, to learn from you. I hope I get a chance to lecture you sometime. But for now, I think you have given me enough food for thought, and hopefully to the viewers also. Again, I will take this opportunity to advertise your book again. Please buy this book.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful book, and it's written with great lucidity and this painstaking effort that you have taken. Thank you again for coming and speaking about these ideas, and for doing all that you do to raise awareness in the Hindu Samaj, for your clarity of thought. And so I hope to see you again very soon on Up Close with Upward.
Thank you.
Thank you.